Divorced men. What happened when she realized her plan B didn't want her either? Story 1. When my ex filed for divorce, she said she'd outgrown me. Translation. She'd been texting her gym trainer for months. I found the messages by accident. Wish you were in my bed instead of him, kind of stuff. She moved out 2 weeks after D-Day and was living in a crappy one-bedroom near the gym. But she acted smug, like this was her glow-up era. I was devastated, yeah, but I shut up and focused on our 7-year-old son, Liam, and on untangling the financial mess. Everyone knew about the trainer. She didn't care. She actually told me, "You'll be fine. You're stable. I need passion." Fast forward 8 months. Divorce is finalized. I've lost weight, got promoted, built a decent routine with Liam. It still hurt, but it didn't own me anymore. Then one night I get a text from her. "Can we talk?" "It's important." We meet in a cafe. She looks wrecked. Puffy eyes, no makeup. Turns out the trainer just got engaged to someone else. Her soulmate was getting married and had blocked her after she showed up at his place crying. She goes, "I made a mistake. We had something real. You and me. I know it now." I just stared. This was the same woman who called me boring because I reminded her to pay the electric bill. Then she says the line that flipped the switch in my head. "You're my safe place." He was my escape. I thought if it didn't work out, I'd always have you. There it was. I wasn't a husband. I was the emergency exit. I told her calmly, "I'm not your plan B. I'm Liam's dad. That's it." She started crying louder, drawing stares. "So you're just going to throw away 10 years? I said, "You threw them away when you went all in on a guy who didn't even want you. I'm not the consolation prize because your bet didn't pay off." I walked out. Outside, I sat in my car shaking, half guilty, half free. Later that night, she texted a wall of messages. Apologies, nostalgia, photos of us when we were young. I didn't respond. I just forwarded the parenting part to our co-parenting app and blocked her number everywhere else. She finally understood that when plan B doesn't want you, there might not be a plan C. Story 2. My ex always had this weird habit of keeping options. Old flings on Snapchat, random guys in her DMs, a coworker she swore was just like a brother. I was insecure about it, sure, but every time I brought it up, she'd flip it on me. "You're controlling. You don't trust me," etc. We'd been married 6 years when I found out about her plan B. I was on her iPad looking for a recipe, and the messages popped up. Her brother from work wasn't exactly talking like family. "I can't wait until you're free. Imagine waking up next to me instead of him." My wife had replied, "Soon. I just need to figure out how to leave without looking like the bad guy." So I did her a favor. I screenshotted everything, sent it to myself, and then asked for a separation. I didn't yell. I didn't smash anything. I just laid the screenshots on the table and said, "I'll be the bad guy." "I'm done," she cried, begged, then switched to rage. Over the next few months, she rewrote the story to anyone who'd listen. I was cold. We'd grown apart. She'd made a mistake, but only emotionally. Meanwhile, she floated towards her coworker like it was some rom-com payoff. He never actually committed, though. That was the fun part. For almost a year, they were stuck in this limbo where he'd flirt and sleep with her. But every time she brought up us, he'd backpedal. "Work is crazy. My family wouldn't understand. Divorce is a lot. I don't want drama." She thought once my divorce was final, he'd step up. Instead, after our court date, he suddenly got serious with a new hire. She showed up at work one day and saw him giving that girl the same little forehead kiss I used to give her. That's when she realized she'd never been the one. She'd been his convenience. A month later, she called me about our daughter's school thing, and then slipped in, "Can we maybe grab a coffee?" I feel like we never really processed everything. At the cafe, she tried to do the whole soft, nostalgic routine. We were good together. Maybe we just needed time apart. She admitted her coworker had led her on, how she'd thought they were building something real. I listened. And then I told her, "You left our marriage prepared with a backup plan. You thought I'd sit here waiting in case it didn't work out. I'm not that guy anymore." She looked genuinely stunned, like the idea of me saying no had never crossed her mind. I told her I was seeing someone. It's not some grand love story yet, but it's honest. No secret DMs, no brothers at work. She whispered, "So I have no one," and I could see the panic under the tears. She'd built her whole identity around always having a man in orbit. I walked her to her car out of basic decency. She tried to hug me. I stepped back and offered my hand instead. "We'll co-parent. That's all." People in the comments can argue if I should have given her another chance, now that her plan B ghosted her. But from where I'm standing, I'd rather be alone than be someone's emergency backup when their fantasy falls apart. Story 3. My ex-wife's plan B was my former friend. I didn't know that at the time, obviously. I just thought she liked hanging out with him because he understands my creative side. Turns out, her creative side was sending late-night selfies and complaining about how I didn't get her. When I found the messages, I told him first. I said, "You can have her. I'm done." He froze, then said something I'll never forget. "Whoa, man." I never saw it as serious. He ghosted her the second he realized I was taking my name off the equation. He blocked her on everything, quietly switched departments at work, and started dating someone else 2 months later. Meanwhile, she blew up my phone, insisting I misread everything and that he'd always loved her. She only accepted the truth when she saw him posting couple pictures with his new girlfriend. That's when she tried to circle back. Told me we were meant to be, that she'd been confused, that he'd used her. Nah. She aimed for an upgrade, used me as the safety net, and then discovered the net had a big hole in the middle. Now the only relationship between us is a shared Google Calendar for custody. Story 4. My ex was obsessed with never depending on a man, which was ironic because she always had at least 2. I was the husband who paid the mortgage and handled the boring life stuff. Her plan B was an older, richer guy from her yoga studio, the kind of man who takes pictures of his watch on the steering wheel. She swore they were just friends. I believed it until the night she came home blackout drunk and her unlocked phone started ringing. His name popped up with a heart. I didn't answer, just let it ring while I scrolled through the messages. Vacations he'd promised. The condo he might buy. How he'd treat her like the goddess she was. I didn't argue. Next morning I told her we were done. She didn't even fight. She said, "Maybe this is for the best. I need someone who can match my lifestyle." Funny thing is, the lifestyle she was talking about was the one I'd been paying for. But whatever. I filed for divorce. She moved into a tiny rented place, fully convinced that once she was free, rich yoga guy would swoop in and upgrade her. And for a while, it looked like it might happen. He took her to dinners, posted vague Instagram stories from nice hotels. She flaunted it on social media, passive-aggressive captions about finally being appreciated. But he never actually made it official. Months went by. No keys, no toothbrush, nothing. She'd drop hints, he'd dodge. She told our mutual friend, "He just needs time. Divorce scares him." Then one day she tried to put the screws on him. She gave up our full weekend custody and asked if I could take our daughter extra because I might be moving soon. I agreed. More time with my kid is always a win. Apparently that same weekend she confronted him. She wanted to know where things were going, suggesting they should plan a future, or at least move in together. He told her, in the lobby of a hotel of all places, that he'd never promised anything serious. He liked the attention, the sex, the ego boost. But he wasn't about to take on someone else's baggage. Ex, kid, debt. "I date women like you," he said. "I don't marry them." She called me from the parking lot sobbing. At first I thought something happened to our daughter. Then she started ranting about how men were trash, how he'd used her, how I never warned her. I just said, "What would that warning have changed?" Silence. Then, "Can we try again? For our daughter?" "Our daughter, huh?" Interesting how she remembered the child when her rich escape hatch slammed shut. By then, I'd been in therapy, gotten my finances sorted, and rediscovered what a quiet, peaceful home feels like. Sure, I made mistakes in the marriage. I could have been more attentive. But I wasn't the one juggling a husband and a sugar daddy and calling it empowerment. I told her, "No, we can be good parents." That's it. She tried the guilt angle. "So you're fine watching me struggle?" I reminded her she'd said she didn't need a man, that she'd chosen this. I offered to help with budget planning and recommended a good therapist. That's where my responsibility ends. Later, a mutual friend told me she'd tried reconnecting with a different ex after yoga guy rejected her. That guy shut it down immediately. If I wasn't enough when you were broken married, I'm not your safety net now. So yeah. Her plan B didn't want her. Plan C didn't either. Turns out when people realize they're just placeholders in your head, they don't line up to save you. The only plan I've got now is raising my daughter in a home where love isn't just a backup strategy. Story 5. When my ex-wife left, she didn't leave quietly. She gave a whole speech about how I'd held her back, how she needed to find herself, how someone else already sees my worth. That someone else was a guy in her friend group, Tom. I knew him. We'd had beers together. Apparently, while I was working overtime during the pandemic, they were trading jokes about how miserable I looked. I didn't fight the divorce. I signed, moved into a small apartment, and bought mismatched IKEA furniture. It was humiliating at first, but at least it was honest. Meanwhile, she started soft-launching Tom on Instagram. His hand in a photo here, his car there. You could see the smugness. People in the comments, mostly her friends, were like, "So happy for you. You deserve real love." 4 months later, I got a front row seat to the plot twist. We were at a mutual friend's birthday. I went because it was my weekend without the kids and I needed to remember I had a life. My ex walked in with Tom, holding his arm like a trophy. An hour in, Tom disappeared to the balcony with another woman. Not just any woman, his ex. They were arguing, loudly enough that the whole party went quiet. The ex was saying, "So you dumped me for her but still sleep with me when she's at work? You think I wouldn't tell her?" You could see the math happening on my ex's face from across the room. She stormed out to the balcony. They all started yelling. The friend whose party it was finally snapped and told them to take their drama elsewhere. Outside, in full view of everyone smoking on the sidewalk, Tom shrugged and said, "We were never official. We were just having fun. You left your husband, that's on you," she screamed. "I left for you." He laughed, actually laughed, and said, "You shouldn't have." I wish I could say I felt pure joy, but honestly it was a weird mix of satisfaction and secondhand embarrassment. This wasn't some private karmic moment. This was public. Later that night she texted me, "I made a horrible mistake. You were always the only man who really loved me." For the first time in years, I didn't respond out of emotion. I responded like a man who'd finally figured out that love without respect is just dependency with nicer lighting. I wrote, "I did love you. You knew that. And you still had a backup lined up before you were even out the door. I won't be another backup now that he's done with you. We can talk about the kids, nothing else." She tried to keep the conversation going, throwing out memories, photos, little flirty emojis. I didn't bite. I think that's what shocked her more than Tom dumping her on a sidewalk, realizing that the one person she was sure would always be there had learned how to walk away too. Story 6. My ex thought she was subtle. She started going to late study sessions for her MBA, even though she'd never cracked a book at home. I had a hunch, but I stayed quiet and watched. Eventually, I found a second Instagram account she didn't realize was visible to her contacts. Lots of candid pics with the same guy, a divorced classmate, Mark. Wine glasses, study rooms that looked a lot more like hotel lobbies. Captions like, "Finally seen." When I confronted her, she didn't deny it. She went straight into justification mode. "We're connected. You and I are just roommates. You don't get my ambition." He does. I told her if she wanted out, I wouldn't chain her. She took that as my blessing and moved into a tiny place closer to campus, acting like she'd just been promoted out of our marriage. For a while, it seemed like Mark was all in. Dinners, drives, meeting her classmates. She kept dropping hints to mutual friends that she'd trade one divorced man for another, but this time one who gets her. Then the semester ended, and reality hit. Turned out Mark had 2 kids and an ex-wife who wasn't interested in sharing their weekends with my ex's new chapter. He'd been cool with playing campus boyfriend, but when she started bringing up blending our families and moving in, he froze. She told me about it first by accident. She called, crying about how complicated everything is. And in the middle of it, she said, "He said he didn't sign up for someone who just walked out on her husband and kid. He said that tells him everything he needs to know about me." That part sobered me up. The guy she threw our family away for literally used her own choices as a red flag. The following week, she tried to pivot. Her texts got warmer, more nostalgic. She sent pictures of our son as a baby, reminded me of trips we'd taken, said things like, "We were actually a good team, weren't we?" And then came the line, "I thought if it didn't work with him, we could maybe rebuild us. Slowly. For our son." There it was. Not apology, not accountability, just an admission that I'd been mentally penciled in as plan B this whole time. I replied, "We will always be a team for our son. But you made sure there is no us to rebuild. You left before you even told me you were unhappy." She called me selfish, said I was punishing her for making a mistake. Maybe I am. Or maybe I just don't want to live the rest of my life as the safety net a guy at grad school already tested and decided to drop. People love to say everyone deserves a second chance. Maybe, but I don't owe her a backup life just because Plan B looked at who she really was and walked away. Story 7. My ex-wife used to talk about this guy from high school like he was some unfinished love story. If things had been different, she'd say, then trail off. I thought it was just nostalgia. We hit a rough patch after our second kid was born. Sleep deprivation, money stress, the usual. During that time, she reconnected with Mr. High School via Facebook. "It's harmless," she said. "He lives in another state." Harmless turned into hours-long calls, flirty comments, and late-night venting about our marriage to a man who was basically a stranger to her adult self. I only realized how deep it went when I found a message. "If I leave, will you catch me?" He'd replied with a bunch of heart emojis and, "I've waited for you my whole life." 2 months later, she announced she wanted a separation. Claimed it wasn't about anyone else, just that she'd fallen out of love. I knew that was a lie but didn't have the energy for a war. I agreed. We drafted a custody plan. I moved out. She booked a flight to his state the first weekend I had the kids. Told mutual friends she was finally going to live the love story she deserved. The whole thing imploded in 48 hours. Apparently, high school soulmate forgot to mention that he still lived with his ex. Not officially together, but figuring things out. When my ex showed up with a suitcase and this idea that she'd stay for a few weeks while she looked for work, the ex politely asked her what the hell she thought was happening. From what I heard, the ex laid it out very clearly. He gets drunk and messages you every time we fight. Then we make up and he pretends you don't exist. You blew up your marriage over drunk texts. When my ex tried to confront him, he stammered something about mixed signals and not being ready. By the end of the weekend, he'd blocked her number and gone back to working on things with the woman who actually lived there. On Sunday night, as I was bathing our kids, I got a text. Can we talk when I'm back? I've realized some things. I already knew what some things meant. Her parachute didn't open. We met in a park so the kids could play. She looked like she hadn't slept. She admitted everything. The emotional affair, the trip, the crash. Then she said, I know I messed up, but maybe this was what we needed to appreciate what we had. I said, you didn't just mess up. You left. You made me the backup plan to a man who wouldn't even give you a spare key. She tried to grab my hand. We have history. They don't. I watched our kids racing down the slide and realized that the only person I owed loyalty to in that moment was them, not the woman who treated our family like a choose-your-own-adventure she could restart whenever she wanted. So I said, our history ends as a couple. It doesn't end as parents. That's all I can offer. She cried, told me I was throwing away our chance at a happy ending, but she'd already thrown it away. On a guy who deleted her faster than old messages once reality showed up at his door. Story 8. My ex-wife was always terrified of being alone. She couldn't sit in a quiet room without turning on a podcast or calling someone. So when our marriage started to wobble, instead of going to therapy with me, she found noise. The noise had a name, of course. Liam, bartender at the place she and her friends loved. Younger, tattooed, very good at listening to drunk people overshare. I didn't know he existed until after she left, honestly. She told me she needed space, moved in with a friend, and within a week I saw her in the background of his Instagram story, curled up in his hoodie. Mutual friends said she was finally happy, that she'd never looked so free. The narrative quickly became that I was the dull, emotionally unavailable husband who didn't appreciate her, and Liam was the fun, supportive soulmate. Cool. I let them have their story. I focused on our son, my job, and the silence in my new apartment. Turned out the silence wasn't that scary. It was peaceful. 3 months later, she knocked on my door. No warning. I opened it, and there she was, mascara streaked, holding a grocery bag full of her leftover mail. Can we talk? She asked. She told me Liam had changed. Translation? He stopped playing therapist and started acting like a 26-year-old bartender who didn't want to spend his nights helping a 32-year-old single mom cry over custody schedules. When she brought up moving in together, he apparently said, I didn't sign up to be a stepdad. I thought you were just having fun. She looked genuinely shocked when she repeated that to me, like she couldn't fathom not being wife material in someone's eyes. She'd bet our entire life together on a guy who liked her as a regular at his bar, not as a whole human with baggage. Then came the pivot. I realize now, you're the only man who's ever really been there. I was scared and stupid. Maybe we could try date nights again? Start slow? I asked her. If he hadn't said that, would you be here? She paused just a second too long. I don't know. That was my answer. She wasn't choosing me. She was choosing not to be alone, and I happened to be the nearest warm body with shared memories and a steady paycheck. I told her, I'm glad you know what you don't want, but I'm not something you come back to because the party ended. We're done romantically. I'll always show up for our son. That's it. She snapped. So you're perfect now? No. I wasn't perfect when we were married, and I'm not now. But I'm finally okay existing without being someone's plan B after the bartender clocked out. She left angry, then sad, then quiet. The funny thing is, the silence after she stopped trying to win me back felt even better than the silence after she left. It wasn't empty anymore. It was mine. Story 9. My ex-wife's plan B was not a single guy. It was an entire fantasy built around the idea of being an influencer. She followed this charismatic coach online, a guy who ran empowerment retreats for women and posted a lot of shirtless hiking photos. She started DMing him, then voice notes, then Zoom coaching calls. I didn't think too much of it at first. We were in a slump, sure, but I thought a self-help kick might actually be good. Then I saw their chat. She wasn't just talking about goals. She was telling him how trapped she felt, how she wanted to burn her life down and start over. His replies were full of spiritual-sounding garbage that boiled down to, follow your desires, The universe will catch you. He invited her to one of his retreats in another state. She framed it as a once-in-a-lifetime growth opportunity. We argued. She went anyway. When she came back, she told me she wanted a divorce. I asked, "Is there someone else?" She said, "There's something else. A different life I need to live." We separated. She moved out, started posting soft-filtered selfies with captions like, "Finally choosing me." I found out through a mutual friend that she was telling people she and the coach had a deep soul connection and were planning to collaborate on retreats, maybe even move in together eventually. Fast forward 6 months. We're in mediation. She walks in late, eyes red, phone blowing up. She keeps stepping out to take calls, coming back angrier each time. During a break, the mediator leaves and it's just us. She blurts out, "He canceled on me." Turns out Guru Guy had a wife, legally separated but still very much married, and a whole trail of women he'd guided into leaving their lives behind. As soon as my ex started pushing for real commitment, he told her she was blocking his abundance with her expectations. Then he blocked her. She said, "I gave up everything." For what? I didn't say it out loud, but the answer was, for a dude with a ring light and a PayPal link. Then she looked at me, really looked at me, and said, "We could fix this, right? People come back from worse. You're a good man." We were solid before I got lost. And for a second, I saw the woman I married. Before hashtags and soulmates and alignment, part of me wanted to say yes, just to put the pieces back. Then I remembered the messages where she told a stranger I was dead weight keeping her from her destiny. How she lined him up emotionally and financially before she even told me she was unhappy. So I said calmly, "I'm not your backup plan because your guru blocked you. I'm your co-parent. That's the only role I'm willing to play now." She cried, accused me of abandoning her when she was at her lowest. The irony almost made me laugh. People ask if I regret not trying again. I regret that she saw our marriage as something she could trade for a spotlight that never turned on. But I don't regret stepping out of the line of fire when her plan B lit the match and walked away. Story 10. When my ex-wife finally realized her plan B didn't want her, it happened in the most brutal way possible. In our living room, with him standing right there. Backstory. While we were married, she was always weirdly close to her coworker, Jake. "My work husband," she joked. I didn't love the phrase, but every time I expressed discomfort, I was told I was insecure. Over time, she started openly comparing us. Jake surprises his wife with flowers every Friday. Jake just gets me. It became a running theme. When we hit a rough patch, the comparisons intensified. I suggested therapy. She suggested separation. A month later, she admitted she had feelings for Jake and thought we should divorce before anything happens. I asked, "Has anything happened already?" She didn't answer. That was answer enough. I moved to the guest room while we worked out logistics. She was on her phone constantly, whispering in the hallway, coming home late from work. I was basically a roommate who helped with the kids and bills while she emotionally moved out. Then came the day she decided to make the leap. She told me she'd invited Jake over so we could all talk and be adults about this. I was expecting an ambush. Some united front where they tell me they're in love and we should co-parent peacefully. I braced myself. Jake showed up looking like he wanted to be literally anywhere else. We sat at the table. My ex started her speech about honesty and following your heart. She reached for his hand. He gently pulled his back. Red flag number 1. She pushed through anyway. "We didn't mean for this to happen," she said, "but we can't deny what we feel. I think the best thing is for me and my name to separate so Jake and I can build something healthy and transparent." Jake cleared his throat and said, That's not exactly how I see it." You could hear the air leave the room. She blinked. "What?" He looked at me, then at her. "I care about you, but I'm not leaving my marriage. And I'm not starting a new family. I thought we were just talking, venting. I told you I wasn't going to blow up my life." She went white. "You said you loved me." He shrugged, visibly uncomfortable. "Yeah, but I didn't mean like run away together love. You were unhappy. I was just trying to be supportive." The woman who'd emotionally checked out of our marriage for this guy realized in real time that she was his emotional side quest, not his endgame. She turned to me, eyes huge, and said, "Say something." I said, "What is there to say? You already left. He just decided not to catch you." She started sobbing, begging Jake to tell the truth. He muttered some apologies and practically ran out of the house. I watched from the window as he stood on the sidewalk, hands on his knees, like he'd just finished a sprint. Then he blocked her number in his car. After he left, she turned all that panic toward me. "We can fix this. We can pretend this never happened. Please." And here's where some people will say I should have taken advantage of the situation, made her work for it, whatever. But all I saw was a woman who only remembered the husband she'd discarded once her fantasy evaporated. I told her, I'm not the consolation prize because your affair partner wouldn't give you what you wanted. I'll be here for our kids, not for you. She screamed that I was cruel. Maybe I am. But honestly, not as cruel as using someone as plan B, bringing plan A into their home, and assuming both men will fight over you. In the end, neither did. Story 11. My ex liked to complain about money, but she also hated working full-time. When she finally did go back to work, she landed a job at a small marketing agency and immediately started talking about her brilliant boss, Adrian. At first, it was normal stuff. He really sees my potential. He says I'm wasted at home. Then the comments got weird. He says if I didn't have a husband, he'd whisk me away to Europe, followed by a giggle that didn't sound like a joke. I shrugged it off until I saw the texts on our shared iCloud. Late night messages. Her. Sometimes I wish I'd met you before I got married. Him. You still can choose your future. I confronted her. She spun it as harmless flirting and said I was threatened by her success. 3 months later, she announced she wanted a divorce. Adrian says I shouldn't dim my light for a man who doesn't dream big. We separated. She moved into a studio near the office, started dressing like a TikTok girl boss, and kept hinting that she'd be traveling a lot soon. I knew exactly who she thought she was traveling with, except HR got there first. Apparently, a junior employee reported Adrian for hitting on multiple women. HR dug through phones and messages, and suddenly my ex, who'd assumed she was the one, realized she was one of several. Adrian didn't whisk her away. He offered a quiet, "This can't continue," and a signed reprimand. She resigned before they could fire her. She showed up at my place that night, shaking. He said I misunderstood, that it was just workplace banter. I left my marriage for banter. Then the kicker. We could fix this, right? We just got lost. We can go to counseling. I know now who actually cared about me. I asked, if he'd offered you that Europe trip, would you be here? She stared at the floor. I don't know. Exactly, I said. I was never a partner. I was the backup in case your boss didn't cash out. We still talk about our son's schedule. Anything past that? Forwarded to email and ignored. She gambled our marriage on a man who wouldn't even risk his job for her, then expected me to be the severance package. Story 12. My ex-wife's plan B was my own younger brother. Let that sink in. They always got along. He's the charming, funny one. I'm the steady one. At family dinners, they'd roast me together, which I put down to harmless banter. Then she started volunteering to help him with his startup. Late-night brainstorming sessions, strategy meetings at bars, inside jokes I wasn't part of. When I questioned it, I got, "You're jealous of your brother." That's so ugly. One night I walked into our living room and saw her curled up on the couch, whispering into her phone. I heard my brother's laugh through the speaker. She didn't even bother to jump. A month later, she told me she wanted a divorce. We've been done for a long time, she said. I need someone who understands me. I asked straight out, is it him? She said nothing. Silence was confirmation. I cut my brother off that night. Called him, said, you can have her. You're dead to me. He kept saying, nothing happened, man. But I was done. Here's the twist. I was wrong and right at the same time. Nothing had physically happened yet. But in her mind, he was already plan B. She filed. She moved into an apartment across town. And then, finally, she made her move. My brother called me 2 months later, voice shaking. Dude, she came over, okay? She said now that you two are done, we can finally see where this goes. She tried to kiss me. I waited. I told her she'd cheated on both of us, he said. Emotionally with me, physically with you. If she can betray her husband with his own brother, what would she do to me? I told her to leave and never come back. My ex texted me the same night, furious. You've poisoned your family against me. Your brother is weak. We could have had something real, I answered once. You didn't just burn your marriage. You salted the ground. Don't come to me because the person you aimed at finally looked at you clearly. Now I see my brother at separate times from her. People online would probably argue if my brother is still trash for letting it get that far. Fair. But the one thing I know is this. Once her plan B said, absolutely not, there was no universe where I was going to step back in as plan C. Story 13. My ex worked as a hairstylist in a fancy salon. Lots of wealthy regulars, lots of gossip. She used to come home and talk about one client in particular. Divorced, loaded, always tipping in cash. He treats me like a queen, she'd say. Some women just have it better. I should have seen it coming. When we started arguing about money and I asked her to help more with bills, she snapped, I spend my days listening to women describe the lives they deserve. Then I come home to you counting coupons. A few months later, she dropped the bomb. I'm not happy. I think I rushed into marriage. I need space to figure out who I am. 2 weeks after moving out, she posted a photo on Instagram. Her in the passenger seat of a luxury car, manicured hand on a designer bag. The caption? Finally being spoiled. The guy's watch was visible. I recognized it from her salon stories. She started living like his favorite accessory. Dinners, trips, spa days. Meanwhile, child support and rent were on me. She was too busy to take extra nights with our daughter because his schedule is very demanding. Then reality hit her like a truck. He had a grown son I'd never heard about, only a few years younger than her. When my ex started talking about wanting more commitment, hinting at marriage and moving into his place full-time, he shut it down. "You're fun," he told her. "But I'm not doing the whole stepdad to a young kid thing again. And I'm not leaving my house to anyone new. My son gets everything." She told me this later, crying. "He said I'm great for now, not forever." I stayed quiet. Then she said it. "You always loved me more. We were a family. Maybe we could try again?" I was stupid. I wanted to skip steps. I asked, "If he'd promised you the house, would you be saying this?" She didn't answer. Didn't need to. I told her, "Our daughter deserves 2 stable homes, not one man who's her father and another who might upgrade you. I'll work with you as a co-parent. As a husband, that position's permanently filled. By nobody. People say I'm bitter. Maybe I am. But I'd rather be bitter alone than sit across from a woman who only remembered our marriage after her rich client reminded her she was never in the will." Story 14. My ex-wife's plan B started as a gamer tag. She joined some online community during lockdown, playing co-op games late at night with a guy from another country. At first it was cute. She hadn't had hobbies in years. Then she started wearing makeup just to sit in front of her headset. Their sessions went from an hour to entire nights. One evening I walked in and heard her whispering, "If I didn't have kids, I'd be on the next flight." Silence. Then his voice through her headset. "Same, babe. We'd be unstoppable." We had a massive fight. She accused me of being threatened by friendships. I said, "Friends don't call each other babe while their spouses sleep alone." A few months later, she told me she wanted out. "I feel more alive with him than I have in years," she said. "He gets me." I asked, "Does he know you're planning to move?" She said, "We've talked about it. He said he'd love that someday." Someday. We separated. She moved into a smaller place and started talking about visas and job transfers like it was just paperwork between her and destiny. Then the cracks showed. It started with missed calls. Then less gaming. "He's stressed," she said. One day she called me sobbing. He said the distance is too much. That he can't uproot his life for kids that aren't his. That maybe we should just keep it as a beautiful connection that got us through a hard time. Her soulmate demoted her from life plan to emotional souvenir. A few weeks later she texted, "Can we talk? Not about the kids." We met at a park. She was fragile in a way I hadn't seen before. She admitted she'd thought I'd wait. I figured if it didn't work with him, we could see if there was anything left between us. I told her the truth. "While you were planning flights that never existed, I was learning how to make dinner without crying when the kids asked where you were. That's what's left," she said. "You moved on fast," I said. "You left emotionally long before you left physically. I'm just catching up." Now, when the kids talk to their friends online, I listen with this weird mix of gratitude and resentment. Gratitude that strangers on the internet helped them through the divorce. Resentment that one stranger convinced their mother I was worth leaving before she checked if he'd even unlock his own front door for her. Story 15. My ex and I met through church, so, of course, when things got bad, she decided God was calling her to something new. The something new turned out to be our worship leader, a soft-spoken guy with a guitar and a talent for saying deep-sounding nothing. He counseled couples, prayed with us, then stayed on the phone with her until 1 a.m., just talking about her heart. I told him directly at one point, "I'm not comfortable with how much you're in my marriage." He smiled and said, "Sometimes people just need to be heard, brother." 3 months later, she announced she was leaving. You don't listen. He does. I think God put him in my life for a reason. She moved out, found a room with another woman from church, and suddenly the worship leader's Instagram started featuring mysterious photos of 2 coffee cups, 2 pairs of shoes, sunsets with captions like, "Some connections are ordained." The church was split. Some saw it as scandal. Others called it messy but beautiful. I just stopped going. Then came the Sunday everything imploded. Apparently his wife, yes, the worship leader had a wife, which my ex liked to frame as an unhappy formality, found their messages. He'd told my ex he was praying about leaving, but had been telling his wife she was his one true covenant. The wife walked into service early, marched onto the stage during rehearsal, and read their messages out loud. In front of the full band. My ex was there. So was I, dropping off our kids for Sunday school. The room went dead silent except for my ex whispering, "Oh my God," over and over. The worship leader broke down crying, said he'd sinned, begged his wife's forgiveness on the spot. She didn't say yes, but she didn't leave the church either. The board paused him from leadership. My ex tried to get to him afterward. He literally stepped behind his wife, put a hand on her shoulder, and said to my ex, "I'm choosing my marriage. Please don't contact me again." That night, she showed up at my place. "Everything is gone," she said. "My church, my friends, him. I don't even know who I am. I made us tea because I'm not a monster." She cried, apologized for the emotional affair, admitted she'd told herself it was holy because it felt intense. Then she asked, "Could we start over? We were happy once. Maybe this was the wake-up call we needed." I looked at the woman who had told half the congregation that God was releasing her from our marriage so she could chase a man who wouldn't even take her call once his wife drew a line. "I'll always respect you as the kid's mother," I said. "But I'm not the safe harbor you swim back to when your worship leader refuses to get off the stage with his wife. My role now is father and co-parent, nothing else." She said I was unforgiving. Maybe. Or maybe I just finally believed that if someone can use God as the excuse to line up a plan B, they'll use anything when it's time to look for plan C. Story 16. My ex started individual therapy before our marriage actually ended. I was hopeful at first. Thought we'd finally work through stuff. Then she stopped inviting me to joint sessions and started saying things like, "My therapist says I deserve passion, not just stability." His name was Dr. Cole. I never met him, only heard about how insightful he was. She'd come home glowing after sessions, talk about how seen she felt, how no one has ever understood my story like he does. I got uncomfortable, told her it sounded more like a crush than therapy. She accused me of being threatened by emotional intimacy. When she asked for a divorce, she framed it as finally listening to herself. Said she wanted to explore who she was without a ring on her finger. I didn't know then that explore meant sending her therapist late-night emails about her feelings for him. I only found out months later, after the divorce was filed and we were working out custody. She showed up at my place one night, eyes red. "He transferred me," she blurted. Apparently, she'd confessed her feelings to him in a session and followed it up with a long, romantic email. Instead of confessing back like in her fantasy, he calmly told her it was an ethical violation for him to keep seeing her and referred her to a different therapist. "He just dropped me," she said. "He made it sound like I was a problem to be passed along, after everything I shared with him." Then she looked around my apartment, the toys on the floor, the pictures of our son on the wall, and I saw the shift. "You were always there for me," she said. "Even when I pushed you away. Maybe I just needed to go through this to realize what we had." I asked if he had said, "Leave your husband, I want to be with you. Would you be here?" She hesitated. Then, "I don't know. Maybe not right away." "So I'm the option when the professional you romanticized followed his code of ethics," I said. "Good to know." She tried to spin it. "This could be our fresh start. We both made mistakes." I nodded. "We did. Mine was ignoring the red flags when you started treating a paid professional like your soulmate. I'm not doing a sequel. Now when she talks to me, it's about our son's therapy sessions in school. She eventually found a new therapist. She'll probably tell that one all about how cruel I was for not taking her back when her therapist refused to become her plan B. Story 17. My ex always wanted to escape this country. Every argument somehow became about how, if we were in Canada, Europe, Australia, life would be different. Enter Lucas, a Canadian dude she met in a Facebook expat group. Suddenly, our fights had a new soundtrack. Lucas says healthcare is free there. Lucas says people are more enlightened. Lucas says I'd thrive there. I was irritated, yeah, but I didn't think she'd blow up our life over a guy she'd never met. Joke's on me. A year into their online friendship, she told me she wanted a divorce and that she'd been in love with someone else for a long time. She moved into a cheap room, started doing video calls with Lucas every night, talking about visas and sponsorship. She told friends she'd finally found someone worth taking a risk for. The plan: get divorced, apply for a visitor visa, go to Canada, see if it feels right, and then Lucas would sponsor her as a partner. She got as far as the airport. At check-in, she discovered Lucas had never actually sent the money for her return ticket like he promised. She called him, frantic. He didn't pick up. She texted, "They need proof of funds. Can you send something?" He replied, "I don't think this is a good idea. My family would freak out. We said we'd see someday, not blow up your life. I can't be responsible for you if it doesn't work out." She called me from the curb outside the terminal. "He just left me," she said. "After everything I did, I didn't gloat. I bought her an Uber home so our kid wouldn't see his mom dragging a suitcase onto a bus in tears." A week later, she asked to talk without anger. She admitted everything. The emotional affair, the secret plans. Then she said, "Maybe this was what I needed to realize, that you were my real home. We could start over. Emigrate together someday, properly." I said, You didn't just fall for a guy. You made him your exit strategy. You thought if the visa didn't work, you'd just come back to your old life. I'm not your backup country. Or your backup husband. She called me heartless. Maybe I am. Or maybe I just don't want to be the guy who gets chosen only after immigration told her plan B wasn't prepared to put his passport where his mouth was. Story 18. Our neighbor Ben was a single dad. Tall, fit, had that I cook and do carpentry thing going on. My ex loved to joke about him. If we ever split, at least I don't have to move far, she'd say. Everyone laughed except me. Over time, their friendly relationship got weird. She'd take him extra lasagna because he's alone, invite him over for drinks when I was working late, send selfies asking which dress she should wear to parties. When I brought it up, she accused me of being paranoid. He's literally our neighbor. It's called community. Then she crossed the line from joke to plan. She told me she wanted a divorce, said we'd become roommates, that she needed real connection. I asked if it was about Ben. She said no. 2 weeks after she moved into an apartment across town, I saw his truck parked outside her place. The group chat lit up with speculation. One friend bluntly asked her if they were together. She replied with a winking emoji. Fast forward a couple months. Our kids were at a birthday party, and I overheard another neighbor say, Ben's new girlfriend seems nice. New girlfriend? Turns out while my ex was mentally planning her move across the lawn, Ben had met someone else, a nurse from his work. They'd started dating quietly. When my ex finally made her move, well, I'm single now. We could see where this goes. He told her he'd never thought of her that way. Honestly, he said, her words, not mine. Watching you flirt with me while you were married was a red flag. If you could cheat on your husband with your neighbor, why would I trust you? That line gutted her. She told me later through angry tears like she expected me to be furious on her behalf. Instead, I just said, he answered a question I was too stupid to ask. Then came her pivot. We have history. We have kids. Maybe this is a sign we should fix us instead of chasing fantasies. I told her, you didn't come back because you miss me. You came back because the man you were banking on actually has boundaries. Now, she and Ben do awkward driveway nods. I talked to him about kid stuff and weather. He apologized once for any role he played. I said, you actually did me a favor. Her plan B lived 30 feet from our front door and still didn't want her when she was finally available. That told me everything I needed to know.